Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Episode number 296. I'm Ronsley. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to use your podcast to pitch for things that others can't get access to. Yes, from access to cool events to making collaborations that others can only dream about, this is the conversation you need to hear. Every business owner can use their podcast to get things their business can benefit from. In this episode, you will learn how to start, the idea of pitching, why you get what you pitch for, and you are always pitching. You understand how to create the big mission and the big impact and how to ask for that. Learn to use your podcast episodes to get in front of community colleges. We take a deeper look at public relations and how to use your podcast as a PR tool. We answer a question about how to become a multimedia mogul, and we rethink your niche and your audience. So we talk about a lot of things, including something that we go in deep with, which is creating something that your people are attracted to. All this and more on this week's episode of Should I Start a Podcast? And make sure you listen all the way to the end, because I'll break down this episode to give you 3 small steps that you can take right now to make this more of an execution experience rather than just a listening experience. So enjoy the show.
Vindicator 1, this is launch control. Please advise when pre-flight checklist is complete.
Vindicator 1 to control. Pre-flight is complete. All indicators read green.
This is Should I Start a Podcast? A show for business owners looking for tips, tricks, and ingenious hacks when it comes to growing a business using their podcast. This is your host, Ronsley. He's interviewed more than 1,400 people and has been listened to over 5 million times in 133 countries. A TED speaker, author, and a podcast purist who believes that we can use our voices to grow our business and our influence. You know, because every conversion in any business always happens in a conversation. And now, Ronsley.
Today, we're going to talk about something that I know, James, you're going to love for sure, like pitching as a podcaster, just pitching in general. This whole panel came from a previous conversation 5 or 6 weeks ago where we all spoke about how hard it was to ask, or we didn't know how to ask. And there's all this like really awkward conversation about asking. So this is all the combination of 5 weeks of just that one comment. So pitching as a podcaster, great to have everyone here. And the reason I want to talk about this, and let's start with probably just asking. What we don't want to happen is have a podcast that you can't leverage, right? We don't want to have something that we're putting all this effort into and not realizing how to sort of leverage it the best we can. And we don't know how to ask, we don't know when to ask, and we don't know what to ask. I wonder if someone could sort of start the conversation about asking, whether it is how to ask or when to ask or what to ask. We can just start around that context. And maybe I'm going to put James on the spot because I feel like he's just so good at this kind of stuff. So maybe James, start the conversation around not knowing how to ask maybe, or when to ask and what to ask.
More than happy to. And I think chapter 1 of this discussion, which can be a very, very lengthy discussion and something I'm super passionate about, begins with the give. It begins with give. What can I do? The more I know about you, the more I can help you. It's focusing on that give. Now, that only comes from an enormous amount of preparation that you have done beforehand. Of course, you can get to it just in a conversation with the person then, but if you're bringing a person on your podcast, ideally you've done a really good amount of research from them. You already have a bit of an idea of what they need. Perhaps they're going to talk about it in a book that they have written. There are many different ways you can find out what someone actually needs. Focus on the give. If it's someone who's older in their career, they're going to be focused on things like legacy. They're going to be focused on being around emerging people who are doing really cool things like younger people. That's an example of something that you could do to focus on people who are a bit older. And also if you've got people who are a little bit younger, or actually really successful business people just more broadly, let's use that as an example, they're going to be focused on what you can do to either give them money or save them time. So focus on the give there. And that's when you can put up potentially a bit of your relationship capital with people who you are if you are very comfortable and very confident that there would be an amazing fit, that is where you can offer to connect them with someone who could potentially be very influential or very impactful for them. Now, the more times you ask, the more you're ranking up the likelihood, the probability that they're going to turn around and say, what can I do to help you? And if you're talking deep things here, if you're talking about impact and mission, these are big things that people want to help each other with. These are big things that like-minded people want to talk about. So I'd focus on that give, give, give. Just give without the expectation of anything in return. And if you do the give well enough, that's when they're going to turn around and they're going to say, what can I do to help you? And that is the perfect opportunity. It's a lot better chance knowing that you've already given some type of value. They've already got a big ROI from the exchange. They're going to be far more likely to be able to help you on the condition that it's something specific and ideally something very, very quick. Maybe it's an introduction to someone that they know as well. It could be a million things, but make sure it's something fairly quick and specific. I would certainly think would be a good start. So that's just a bit of an intro into all that type of thing, and super happy to dive even further into that throughout this session. And as always, excited to hear what other people think.
When I'm thinking about pitching as a podcaster, definitely the when to ask you covered really well, as in like, okay, you give, and you wait to a point. And so that's when you get to ask. What I'm thinking about as a podcast is I have a podcast platform. Let's assume that I make a really good podcast. Let's assume all that stuff. Let's assume I've taken into consideration my audience. I've taken into consideration how I'm going to produce this really engaging show. How do I leverage it? Like, how do I use it in different ways? We had a conversation again about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think her name was Laura. She mentioned how she gets media passes using her podcast as a media person. So she pitches to conferences and events and concerts and different things. And the idea here for me is like, well, how do you leverage something that you create? Because you can either think of it only as I'm not getting listeners, or you can think of it as I'm only going to grow my show, but you can use it in other ways. Like, for example, in 2017, I signed the first deal in Australia with Amazon to upload to Audible. And we signed a 10-year deal to be able to upload audiobooks to Audible. It hadn't been done in Australia. And the reason I got all that credibility and the reason I got even into the office was because I had already recorded maybe 350 episodes by that time. And I used that as leverage to get into the office and get into the meetings, to start the discussions, leave how the discussions all went down and all that kind of stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is we have this platform. We should look for other opportunities to pitch ourselves and pitch our podcast and be a podcaster. Any thoughts on that, team?
I would love to weigh in on that, actually. We have to get really scrappy about how we go about it, because there's a lot of methodologies out there that are just almost becoming commonplace. To get on someone's show, you need to have your one sheet and you blast it out as an email. But I'm thinking that you need to be a little scrappier. So if I were to look at the psychology of entrepreneurship, I would be saying which episodes really dive into the psychology of not just podcasters, but really interesting entrepreneurs, and maybe taking one of those episodes and sending it in an email to a community college, to their business department, their communications department, even their psychology department, and saying, hey, there are other conversations happening out there about what you're teaching. Would you be interested in having me come and speak to your classroom and share what I'm learning out there in real time with experts in entrepreneurship? We all need to take very different approaches to what is considered the standard.
I love where you're going with this. That was Bola. That was a great example of like thinking laterally in ways that are not what I love the red ocean thing and thinking about, because we get that a lot. Like podcasters create podcasts thinking that they should just slap a logo and sell merch. And it's such a huge red ocean is probably the word.
I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Saba Chavez, the senior celebrity publicist at Hollywood. And I am currently working at, we have a course going on that's Introduction to Public Relations, where we're teaching brands, business, and publicists and artists exactly what public relations are. And specifically right now where we're at, obviously after COVID, all of these podcasts came out. So we're always rebuilding a hot media list, but it's very valuable and it's very important right now that we reset ethics, standards, and morals consciously and sustainably in public relations and media. So that's where we're at right now on a worldly scale. And so we definitely are remaking connections and connecting to new podcasts. And I liked what everybody shared. It's so true. I can tell you some of the brands that I'm behind: Rock Nation, Good Music is my home team. Wu-Tang Clan, I'm the only female manager to Wu-Tang Clan, also over ODB, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson's legacies. So that creating and maintaining legacy comes with a lot of work, a lot of trust, but a lot of communication, and just always having a great message, not being afraid to reach out to influencers or people who are a subject matter that you might like to carry. And always, it's that kind of FUBU mentality, starting in the basement from nothing, creating everything. So where we see ourselves represented in the culture today, obviously across the board, but always have something that helps you stick out, but be true to your soul calling. And what we're seeing more and more in journalism, my degree is in mass communications, broadcasting. So I started out as a journalist. And so what we're seeing now is a lot of journalists turning away from wanting to do news, really want to go independent because news is really fear. What we saw after the pandemic was deviant essay, was the pandemic, inside the pandemic, domestic violence and sexual assault. But now, secondly, what we see is mental health, right? And so just trying to really create media, and what the brother said about having 350 videos, Ronsley, it's amazing to have content, and they always push content is king, but really curated content is king. And so if we think about it on a massive scale and how we want to affect the world, definitely bringing conscious, sustainable subject matters to the forefront is where we're really, really headed. So congratulations to all of you. I've followed you all, and if I can be of service or answer any questions, please let me know. Thank you so much.
I love new voices. Oh, welcome. This is so awesome. Please ask your questions. This is amazing.
I'm pretty much positioning myself to be a multimedia mogul, and Seba's class has definitely been something that I cherish. Like, I was just back channeling her just a few minutes ago, and I'm looking to text her because I have social media numbers, but the biggest thing with podcasting for me is, what am I enthusiastic about that I can talk about and bring people in? Like, my angle isn't necessarily even to reach out to celebrities. I want to be able to have people look at my podcast, and when I eventually come out with a blog, and say, you know what, this person that Ife or that Go-To Guy featured is going to be a star. Like, my focus is actually to be what the indie artist market used to be, where you actually were interviewing somebody because you know they were going to be a star, and you interviewed them before they blew up. So I'm actually trying to redefine my niche right now. And I actually do co-host a podcast, but the goal isn't necessarily to monetize just yet. The goal is to actually foster healthy conversation and respectful conversations about love, romance, and how we can respect each other as we get to know each other better. So it's actually in my bio, the Look of Love podcast, and kind of took a break. But once we get back going, it's going to be fun, because one of the biggest things with that podcast was to be able to observe various Black love films and TV shows, discuss those, but then also be able to translate that into conversations where we actually look at how we looked at the movie, and then how do we look at our relationships and who we involve ourselves with. So I'm just happy to be on this stage, and I know monetization is coming, but more so I just want to be in the right space with experts in their field so I can learn.
I love this. And obviously, Media Mogul is such a cool way of looking at the next few years of your life. And I would just hope that you're keeping the two concepts separate, and you're creating the show, which is all about you and you identifying this talent. What a great show that would make. Like, think of yourself 3 years from now having done a show a week where you go out and find and have these conversations with picking talent. Like, those kind of reps are just amazing. And then to add that to your other podcasts is already the start of your empire, which is cool. I wonder whether anyone else has something to say.
I just find it fascinating. And you guys probably would agree that when you talk to people about their podcast, everybody has their own purpose or goal for it. Like we've said, we've established it's an amazing platform that we now have, a platform that we can use for whatever it is. And the one thing that I've noticed that some people fall in the trap of comparing themselves to another podcaster. Oh, they have X number of downloads, or they're making X number of dollars. And if what they're achieving doesn't align with your goal, then don't worry about it. Some people just go into the podcasting world just to make those connections, because you never know where those connections are going to take you. And they're not even worried about making a lot of money. Some people are just going into the podcasting world to connect with their listeners and almost create a community, because everybody loves community. And that's why even Clubhouse is so amazing, because we all feel good when we walk away from it. Like, oh my God, I'm friends now with all these people. But, you know, we've just had this beautiful conversation. And maybe that's all that you need from your podcast, is just developing that close connection with your listener. I think no matter what your goal is, that is so important, and that needs to be first and foremost, thinking about the listener, because time. So what are you going to do for them? How are you going to make them feel special and important? And then no matter what your goal is of the podcast, it'll just happen. If you just take it slow and really, truly, wholeheartedly care about your listener that you're connecting with.
That was exactly what I was thinking about right now. Is there is a very big push for like monetization. Obviously, how does it link into your business and sales and all of that? And sometimes just focusing on that aspect, which of course it's got its place and the time to speak about it and think about it and worry about it. But if you don't get that foundation right, the foundation of like, just what is your message? How does it relate to the wider world, to your sphere, to your audience? And how is it going to transform your audience? And just like focusing, it's more the creative approach where you put the work first, you produce the work first, you show up, you're constant, you're there for them. And then from there, the rest will follow. I just think having that foundation, it's so, so, so important. And I mean, that comes down to just bringing the topic back to pitching as a podcaster. If you've got that foundation, you've got those loyal listeners who've like fed back into your podcast, then being able to pitch your podcast is going to be so much easier, whether you're asking for maybe a guest, might be somebody well-known, might not, but just asking for someone to be a guest on your show, or then establishing how you're maybe going to follow up on that and asking them for, like James mentioned, a connection or just something quick and easy. That depends. And then also asking from your audience. Just from my own experience, it's like, how many times have I had someone who, after we've had a discussion, like in terms of in any of those things, being a guest on my show or even being a client, then one of the first questions is always going to be, can you give me an example of your work? Can you show me an example? And if that is really, really good and they connect with that, then your chances are higher that the answer to the ask is going to be yes.
I would love to share something with you. Siba had said about curation. And when you look at your podcast, taking a very critical eye to curating what you talk about and who you talk about it with is going to be what sets your show apart. And it's really interesting that you are diving into love, maybe by looking at different films and having a conversation that's much needed, because how we look at love has gotten distorted because of a lot of the media that is out there and available. And I would say to you that if I were to put my marketing hat on, which I can never seem to take off, I would suggest to you that you think outside of the box on how you would pitch your podcast. And what comes to mind for me is finding that right show that you did based on a particular movie or whatever, and contacting, for example, like the New York Times publishes a regular column called Modern Love. And they've gone on to create movies on Netflix, like a Netflix series called Modern Love. And it really dives into love and relationships and conversation and people just navigating those waters in this day and age, whether it's through pandemic or not. So that's what I would suggest. Stay really tight and keep it highly curated so that you really tap into your audience and you really create an exceptional product. And then pitch yourself to things that are, again, a little off-center, but different. And that's what would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much for all of this advice. And I'm definitely going to be showing up on a regular basis. I do have access to a new platform, and I'll probably be joining in the next few months. It's called Dystopia. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I can give you the information. But Dystopia is a streaming platform based in Charlotte, North Carolina. They're offering music artists 2 cents per stream. They're offering podcasters 5 cents per stream. And they do have a split service so that if you want to split up the payments, they can be split with whoever's on the team with your creative works. This would be a good way for podcasters that have audience to go ahead and start monetizing it while they're looking to pitch to bigger companies. But once again, that platform is called Dystopia. I've had talks with them, and that's why I'm really getting passionate about podcasting, because they're going to make me a major influencer based off of my social media numbers, but also because I have an eye for great content. And once I get my equipment for podcasting and get the platforms completely right, I'm going to start curating podcasts based off of what my niches are, which are music, entrepreneurship, and fashion. So I'm definitely taking notes right now, because this is a good starting point for me to really gain knowledge from people who are really doing it.
What you said earlier about you want to create something that other people are attracted to. And Seba obviously is doing something so amazing that she's bringing students into Clubhouse so that they can see the power of PR, the power of podcasting, the power of digital media. The one thing I would say is a book actually by Cal Newport. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And it's basically what Stover, who's in the Followed by Speaker section, that's my producer, it's kind of our ringing motto is that if we curate content, if we create content, and this book by Cal Newport was based off of a quote from Steve Martin, the comedian. And he was interviewed early on in his career by Charlie Rose. And they interviewed him and they asked him, Steve, how have you become such a good comedian? And what he said was, I'm going to tell you an answer that you don't want to hear. And it's be so good that they can't ignore you. So it's focusing on your craft.
Hey, this is Katerina Joubert. I'm a creator, podcaster, and maker of amazing videos. I'm on the inside of We Are Podcast members, or as we call it, the Wamily. If you were thinking about growing your business using a podcast and your online presence, come join us on the inside. I would love to meet you. James and Ronsley coach us to get those reoccurring results in our businesses. If you want the roadmap which we all follow to get those results, you can download it by following this link, roadmap.wearepodcast.com. Now, here's Ronsley.
Everyone's so welcome to come here and join us and have a conversation and especially ask a question from a business angle for podcasting, because there's all these myths out there about building it and they will come, and all these myths about how to sustain your art. Because I'm an artist at heart, right? I'm not the business owner. I'm the artist at heart that had to learn to become the business owner. And as an artist, the thing that is painful is always during the creation. It's like the shedding of the skin. You're creating and you're in this disarray trying to make this thing because you want it to be complete. And when it's done, you want it to make it better because you have so much more now to give this because you've done the rep of just doing it. So it's so amazing. But what tends to happen is we forget the best part about art is to sustain the art. And for you to keep creating your art, you need to find profit that drives this art so that you can keep in your happy place and keep creating and keep being the artist so that this thing can flourish and do really cool things. And part of that is pitching. So I'm curious, anyone else have anything to add to the conversation?
I got something on that, Ronsley. I love that. And Ife, it's really cool what you're doing. And I'm so super into this idea of collaborating and figuring out a way. Because first of all, when we were talking about making the profit from the art, it's the same energy that goes into it. And so we have to remember that, like, if your art is helping people, but you're not making enough money, there's a certain amount of, well, okay, if I'm not making enough money, I'm not helping enough people. So let's see, who can I help today? Like waking up saying, who can I help today? And then the collaborating, especially for what Ife is doing and having come from an entertainment industry background, that is such a good idea. And it's such a Ife, I want you to be branding yourself. You probably already are. So forgive me if I'm just repeating the obvious, but branding yourself as the tastemaker who finds this up and coming talent. Like you're the guy who finds them. This is the place to find. We're like the new Rolling Stone magazine or whatever the new modern equivalent of that is. When I was in the 90s, whoever set to pop was going to be playing SNL. And then all of a sudden, they hit it really big. Like that kind of a thing where you're the guy who sources this talent. And then you can go around. I'm telling you, talent agents and talent management companies are always wanting to find people if they want to sponsor stuff. And then also using Clubhouse. I have seen some incredible uses of Clubhouse, of people bringing on talent managers, A&R reps, voiceover agents, whatever, and saying everybody gets 30 seconds and the first 20 people to raise their hands are going to sing for these reps or read voiceover copy or do a monologue or whatever it is, looking for talent that incorporates the audio medium. You could even tape that and put that on your podcast, but I just feel like that's a really cool angle that you're taking. That we've spent a lot of time talking about your stuff is because we're all excited for what it is that you're doing. So congratulations.
Oh man. Well, it's funny because the nickname I've given myself is Energy Man, because I always like to put good energy in whatever situation I'm a part of. And it's so funny as I'm getting this advice because I'm actually working with 2 music licensing companies. And one of the guys has thorough experience in podcasting. And just a few days ago, we were talking about pretty much laying down a blueprint to be able to do a Clubhouse room that would be a podcast and could very well evolve into a television show where we're actually giving artists music licensing opportunity, but we're also talking about music and people's journey through music in a very organic and real type of conversation. So I'm definitely on my way, but I'm humble enough to know that I definitely need help. I definitely need rooms like this. And I definitely need the people that have reached out to me and have poured into me, because this journey is not even about me. My purpose in life is to connect people and make dope events and dope situations happen. So as long as I am staying true to my purpose, I can't fail.
You know, your energy is definitely contagious, and it's amazing to see what you did to this room and how you lit it up, even without none of us actually seeing you. But one of the things I wanted to say on that was in 2014, I decided that I was going to do, this is one of the things that popped in my head when you were talking. And the thing was, I decided that I was only going to do cool shit with cool people in cool places. And I promise you, if I look back 7 years, it has been exactly that. So just having that at the back of your mind is just a great, James probably has something to say.
Love that, Rons. Cool shit, cool people, cool places. Very, very cool. I'm all in. I'm sure everyone else here is too. On the topic of today, I just wanted to add to what Anna was saying there, like more broadly, creating the urgency of why people should support you with what they're doing. You can make it heart-centered, but it needs to be about the mission. There was a story I heard recently about, it was in Germany earlier in the year, about a kid who was diagnosed, I think it was terminal cancer, horrible situation, and the kid loved motorbikes. So his parents asked if there was anyone out there who had a motorbike who would come past the hospital. And word got out, and because it was such a heart-centered mission, something super specific, more than 15,000 people on their motorbikes rode past and made this kid's day. What an incredible story. So when you're thinking about creating the urgency out there into your own mission, what are you doing to raise the stakes, to create that urgency, to create that motion, to that movement, to initiate people to want to help, rather than, if it's something like that, that's big like that, then you don't really have any of those things holding you back. You just go for it, and the right people are going to appear and you can initiate that movement. So I just wanted to share that as an example because I thought that might be an easy thing for people to remember.
Yeah, that was baller. Anyone else have anything to add or say to what we've just been talking about? Because I know there were a few people that wanted to say stuff. So if you're here, I don't know, James just joined us. The other James just joined us. Maybe you have a question?
Sure. Hi. I just was interested in what James was saying about mission-driven, and really in terms of the best way to communicate that, or the best medium to communicate that. Is that better done through the podcast itself or on social media? Because we have a whole network. It's called Dog Podcast Network. And one of the overarching missions for everything that we do on DPN is to bring people together based on their love of dogs. So obviously we live in a very rather divisive society and culture today, and it doesn't matter where you are politically or where you are geographically, because we focus on an international audience, not just a US audience. Our overarching mission is to bring dog lovers together. And I just wonder if it's good to re-articulate that. We don't actually talk about that specifically in the podcast, but that's more on our website and other places. But do you think we should actually discuss that on the shows? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, there's many different people you're going to approach. It can be very worthwhile talking about your mission, and I think it's extremely important to do on your podcast. But you need to also recognize that there's little words like because that show the reasoning behind why you're doing something. You can't just have a mission where it's like, yeah, I want to help 1 billion people. What is the because about that? What's the urgency? What's the stakes for people? If you can do that in a way, like if you bring in, an example might be for someone who has like high-level entrepreneurs on their show, and something that you wanted help with was getting more reviews. You could talk about, look, this person is giving up their time for you. They probably charge $50,000 for a corporate speech. It would mean the world to them if you could leave a review and let us know what 1 or 2 favorite takeaways that person shared, so they can check in with that and know that they made an impact, so we can help them with their mission. That's an example of something that you could do with that. And then to make the mission really big, I would be using your podcast network to connect with individuals who have your target audience in droves, and bring that individual into your mission in a way that you can automatically get 10,000 people in the one go. Targeting like those centers of influence, people who have that really big network is very worthwhile too. Just my thoughts.
Can I piggyback too? So if you guys PTR, you'll see my little Bella right there. She's my emotional support animal. And that obviously I'm a dog lover, and she travels with me all over. And there are so many people who have emotional support animals. And so when you kind of target like they were saying like a heart focus. So any type of humanitarian effort or anything that would be like considered a non-for-profit or something just like emotional support animals. That's even something to talk about, to bring in a lot of people in. And you'd be surprised how many people have animals who are influencers, and those animals rock with them everywhere they go. So I would just say that's also another thing to think about. And then there's a lot of brands. I know there's like a hemp brand out now called Dog Walkers, and they have some really good missions. So just kind of aligning stuff that would be able to maybe possibly help you monetize as well in the like commercial space and or sponsor some of those shows.
Can I just sort of follow up on both of those comments? They're both great ideas, but I'm interested in the WIFM from the perspective of one of those groups of emotional support people or James, the entrepreneur community, which is not ours. But what has happened is our shows sound so good and our production quality is so high that when someone who does have a large audience and following looks at it, they feel, and this is just my takeaway, no one has said this directly, but they feel a little intimidated because they think we're so much bigger than we are. And so I was wondering if you had some pointers about approaching people and the actual way to language it, and again, to put it in sort of a WIFM, what's in it for me, so that they understand it other than that they're basically referring your podcast.
Yeah. I'd like to weigh in on that because I think it comes down to your truth. I mean, when you talk about dogs, the first thing I did was I could relate to it because I have a dog. I literally this morning in my journal wrote how grateful I am because also, by the way, I'm listening to a book which I've been probably listened to 6 or 7 times. It's called Letting Go. And one of the things in that book that he mentions is that having a dog increases your lifespan apparently by 10 years. And here there are people trying to do all this kind of stuff to get a few days and all that kind of, just having a dog does that from a love perspective. The reason I'm saying all this stuff is when you talk about your mission, rather than making it about other people, if you kind of say, I am here because this happened to me, this is how I got into it, and this is why I care so much, and that's why I understand what you're feeling, as opposed to, hey, I know what you're feeling, I'll tell you what to do to fix it, which is the normal marketing speak. And the way to reframe that is, you know what, when I was growing up, every time I asked a question, everyone thought that I was questioning authority. So it was always put in these positions where I could not actually say what I wanted to say. Then when I moved to Australia, I sounded very different to everyone here, even though I spoke English my whole life. I speak English at home. I did all my schooling in English. But even then, my accent coming to Australia didn't sound like this. So I wasn't heard or I was ridiculed. So it's weird that all that makes me understand how difficult it is to put your voice out there. That's why I do what I do. And then that creates a whole different conversation, a different connection, a different idea, a different way to sort of bring people together. I wonder whether I'm on track. And I just want to say that this room is going to wind up really soon. So I apologize that I can't take all the questions. But James, does that land at all?
Yes, it does. And when you speak about the Australians, it especially makes sense. Because, well, we have a lot of people down under. In fact, one of my co-hosts on our flagship show had been at the ABC for 20 years and is now working for Dog Podcast Network.
James, based on what you said, I know we've got to wrap up here anyway, so I'll be super quick. It sounds like if I interpreted correctly what you said, in my experience, when that happens, it's because the outreach that you're doing is generic or more generic rather than personalized. If you have a personalized outreach to get those people on the show, then that should be, as far as I've seen, the perfect way of getting those people on there and alleviating a lot of those challenges as well.
Would you mean when they're a guest, get them to post about it afterwards?
No, I thought you meant at the start it was hard to get those people on your show. Was that correct?
Oh, no. We have people genuinely want to be on our show. The problem is, turning it to the theme for this conversation, is we have a mission and we have something that's really, really good. And we find that people who have a large audience seem reluctant to share it, not because it's crap or anything, but we haven't resonated. We haven't given them a powerful enough what's in it for them to effectively promote us.
Yeah, we don't have time for that today. I know it's late. We literally have a 3-hour training on that. Jump into another one of these sessions and I'm sure we can tackle some of those things next time. I love that. That's actually one of my favorite topics.
I love these questions. So please join us next week, same time. I really thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. Siba, please join us. Sean, James, Holly, Sandy, Katerina, Anna. Oh my God, you guys are amazing. Thank you for doing this. I'll see you guys all next week.
I'm host of Win the Day with James Whitaker, also been featured on hundreds of other podcasts, radio and television shows. Ronsley and I also have a business called We Are Podcast, where we help business owners scale their business, grow their business, and do all sorts of really cool stuff like that using the power of their podcast. Always excited to be here with you all every week.
My name is Holly Shannon, and I have a podcast that I call Culture Factor. I'm very excited to say that it's now in the top 2%. Not sure how I got there, but I'm pretty excited. And I'm also the author of Zero to Podcast. And I'm so honored to have a spot weekly here to sit amongst these incredible people. Thank you.
I am Sandy Waters. I'm a radio morning show co-host, still doing it for the past 20 plus years. So our focus is to create 4 hours of memorable and engaging content every single day. And part of the gig is also to help our clients better market themselves and grow their business. I also host a podcast called 7 Figures, Smart Money Strategies for Women. And I also coach podcasters, teaching them proven techniques that I've learned throughout my career.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Katerina. I host Creators Abroad, which is a podcast that delves into the creator economy, what we do, how we make a living, how you can do it anywhere in the world. And on the business side of things, I run a max impact media production company that basically focuses on defining like the soul of people's brands through podcasts and videos. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm Anna Vicino. I am a podcaster. I'm a voice talent, voice of NBC. I'm a comic, and I've turned my podcast into 2 best-selling cookbooks and now a food brand.
So here's the thing. I'm super curious to know what you think. So please send me a message. ronsley@gmail.com is my email address. So send me an email. I'd love to know what you think of this episode. So now that you've listened to this episode, here are 3 small steps that will help you pitch like a podcaster. Number 1, go back through your top 5 podcast episodes, and next to each one of them, write down who would want to hear about this conversation that you've had. Like, what groups of people would want to hear these episodes? All right, that's number 1. Number 2, go to Google and search for others in your industry who have no competitive overlap with what you do, but they have the same target market as you, which means they have the same audience, but they do very different things to what you do, right? That's number 2. Number 3, now do the work and contact them. Get in a conversation with them and align with them on your overall mission and the impact that you want to make. Now, these 3 small steps, if you execute irrespective of where you are at in your business and your podcasting journey, will make a huge, huge impact on your podcast, and it'll make your podcast more profitable and more impactful. If this is the first episode you've listened to all the way to the end, or if you're a regular, thank you. I love that you're here. Check out our back catalog on shouldistartapodcast.com. Subscribe to the show and give me a review and rating. It really, really helps us get found. If you're a business owner, podcaster, and want to join others just like you in a group, we share tactics and ideas on what's working for us when it comes to using our podcast in the best possible way to get more clients, to get more listeners, to get more credibility. Go to wearepodcast.com/group. It is free. And We Are Podcast 2022 is happening this year for all the latest announcements on Australia's first podcasting conference for business owners. Join the free group at wearepodcast.com/group. Stay tuned next week when we are going to cover Pinterest for podcasters. We cover lots, including how to use Pinterest to grow an audience and use that to grow your podcast, but we rethink the whole idea of how to provide value to your audience. So don't forget to subscribe to the show to get that episode as soon as it gets released. Until then, much love. All right. So you still till the end. You found this useful and you have a business or you have a podcast and a business and you kind of want to make it work for you and grow your business using this podcast. Well, you know what? That's something that I have helped thousands of people do and thousands of businesses do in different forms, through an agency in a one-on-one fashion, through a conference, in a group, and obviously in courses and stuff. So please, I want to be able to give you something that you can use to get recurring results in your business using a podcast. We call it the Recurring Results Roadmap. It is years of putting this in practice. It is the blueprint to get results and recurring results using your podcast. If you'd like that, send me a message, ronsley@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your voice, or want to hear from you. So if you've listened to this and you want that roadmap, please send me an email, ronsley@gmail.com. I want to hear from you. Much love. I'll see you in the next episode.